Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Bienvenidos a ¿Qué pasa, Mujer? Welcome to ¿Qué pasa, Mujer? Estamos celebrando otro domingo a las 4 de la tarde. We're celebrating another Sunday in December and a countdown because we will no longer be in 2024 shortly. I think we have 2 Sundays left, so we're trying to celebrate it big. But we're going to go ahead and bring Nicte and Maddie on. Thank you to our producer for doing everything that he makes happen. So we'll go ahead and bring Nicte and Maddie on whenever you guys are ready. And I don't know if you guys notice my necklace and glasses. I have a new sponsor, Maddie Garcia, for the jewelry today. So we're looking forward as well to our special guest today that we have as well. You know, we're always celebrating and talking about history, money, finances. Well, money and finance, the same thing. Relationships, entrepreneurship. And of course, before I forget, when it comes to finances, Latinos contribute 3.4 trillion to the U.S. economy, and we are happily proud of saying that number. And every year the number will continue to increase because we used to be at 3.2 and now we're at 3.4 trillion. So mucho dinero. So we're gonna let's see if Mark can bring the ladies in. So we kind of start our conversation. And again, we're ending 2024 and we're going to be looking forward to 2025. Hola, Mari, ¿cómo estás?
I'm good. Buenas
Mari
tardes.
no se puso color porque sabía que nosotras íbamos a tener color.
I'm sorry. I should have picked up my necklace. I was telling Nicte that I have 2 different colors, but it's the same necklace. And but I'm glad you ladies are wearing it. You look amazing. I love it.
Oh my God.
I just got it in the mail yesterday. So I was like, oh, perfect. So for our audience, we did not coordinate this. I didn't know Nicte was going to wear hers because when I opened mine, I was like, Nicte probably hasn't received it yet because she's all the way in Hawaii. But I'm so excited that we got it and we're wearing it.
I know. And full disclosure, I was like, I got the box and I kind of shook it. I'm like, oh, is it? I think I know what it is. Should I wait for it to open it in Christmas? I'm like, no, I can't wait. So I was like, I just opened it. So yeah,
no,
I love it. Love it.
Because I love so I was highly surprised. And I was like, oh my God, this is so gorgeous. And it's not heavy. And the earrings are so nice.
I feel like royalty, Viviana. Do you feel the same way? I feel like I have to hold my head up high, así.
Sí, me ayuda a tener el cuello así arriba.
Sí, ayuda a la postura.
Sí. I love it.
Como
Thank you, Maddie. You're the best sponsor ever.
Me hace ver un poco más delgada.
It takes the focus away from everything else and just give it.
Sí,
no, it looks beautiful. And it looks beautiful yours too with the black shirt.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm doing black and beige and brown today. So
I love it. I love it. It's perfect. Now we feel like we match you, Maddie, with your necklaces.
You look amazing, ladies. I love it. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maddie. Mwah.
Love you guys.
Love you. I think Viviana also.
Yes, thank you so much.
Back.
I love it. So as I was saying, when you guys came online, you know, we have an array of different topics that we've talked about throughout the last 2 years. And so today we're going to bring our guest, Kevin. He's been on the show before one time, I think, towards the beginning of our showing. He's very knowledgeable about history. He'll kind of tell us a little bit about his background. But I think it's always important how we talk about education, as Maddie would say, in reference to our culture and kind of knowing where we come from. On Fridays, I teach a Spanish class at a homeschool co-op here in the area, and they were talking about how American Indians got here. And so I was like, and it was had nothing to do with my class, but I just saw it on the board, and I was like, hey, like where did they come from, right? And he started giving me his explanation, and then I showed him indigenous people from South America, right? He said they look just like American Indians, like the indigenous people from the USA. I was like, yeah, because they were all the same people at some point. Like it's one body of land. We just, the Europeans came to like divide and conquer, but at one point in our lives, we were all the same. We looked the same. Like you can't tell a Colombian indigenous from what we call today Virginia, American Indian, So it was kind of like a nice, interesting conversation that we had. And again, this is a teenager, right? So it was nice. So I kind of thought about having Kevin on our show today because he's very knowledgeable about history, African history and Latin history as well. And he's bilingual. So Mark, whenever you're ready, you could go ahead and bring Kevin on so we can kind of get our discussion started. Because, as you guys know, that hour goes by really quick. Yes. Yeah. So, where was I? I was in a gathering yesterday. We were talking about how people of color, we all have so many things in common. So we were talking about the food, music, the family, the aspect of how we view family, and how so many things that we have in common. And I know we always talk about this, Maddie, but tell us a little bit about some of the comments that you're writing on here in reference to like the country and the different backgrounds. I don't know what your thoughts were about that.
No, you were just stating that indigenous people at one point we were all the same and that we're more similar than different because we all came from the same place. And it's the same thing. Like we tend to differentiate ourselves depending on what country you were born and because your hair is straight and your hair, and I think people of color, they're all the same thing. Black people, every country, regardless of what you think of, sometimes, like, okay, let's say ourselves, Colombia. When you think about Colombian, you don't think about, a dark-skinned person with kinky hair. That's not the first thought that comes to your mind. But Colombian, there is that those people are in Colombia. You don't, when you think about Dominicans, you probably don't, that's not the first picture that comes to your mind. But most of our population looks like that. When you think about Venezuela, Mexico, I didn't even know Mexico had a huge Black community, So it's everywhere. And we all look exactly the same, So it's just, it's different when we speak or whatever, maybe different language, dialect, but we all look the same.
I love that. We're forever connected. Yeah.
Sure. Like we always say, we focus so much on what makes us different instead of focusing in all the similarities that there are, with all of us, So
Mm-hmm.
I love that, Maddie. Yeah.
And even sometimes just looking at the outside, we look alike. But once we start talking and sharing stories, family stories or traditions, then you start to see even more of that similarity. It's almost like the necklaces that Nikki and I are wearing. They complement each other. You know how I have much more of the blue, but Nikki has much more of the green. So
and mine
it's
is
that.
orange. The one that I have that looks like that, the big part is orange.
I love it.
Yeah, so we all complement each other, even though we're coming from different countries, different regions, different. Maybe sometimes we share the traditions, but maybe just one little thing is off. But I'm sure if we were to study it, it kind of goes to the original, la original. Yeah.
Yeah, true. I was actually watching a video that was talking about mango. Every time you say mango, you immediately think, Dominican Republic, and, that's an official dish and everybody knows what mango is. So it's the mashed plantain. It's kind of like a potato puree, but it's made with green plantains, and that's very traditional in Dominican Republic. We eat that for breakfast. That's kind of like part of our cuisine staple. So but I was watching the history of it, and and of course, it comes from Africa. It's like I think the word was like mongoose or something like that, mongoose with an S at the end, and kind of ended up where it is now. But like again, tracing it back, it can't. It comes from our African heritage. So
Mhm.
I love
Yeah, a
that.
couple
And
of years ago, I saw a video on it was white people like in the mountains, and they were killing a pig, and so they had I don't know, six, seven different families. So each family was in charge of a different part of the pig, and one of the families actually made morcilla, which I thought
mm,
was only Colombian, and the
oh
morcilla is the
mm,
blood sausage.
yeah,
So
oh no, we have
inside
it
it has
too.
the rice and the bread. Yeah. Well, I thought it was a Latin thing. I never thought that white people in the mountain might be eating morcilla like Colombians. That was like a complete shocker for me.
Oh,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry guys, but I'm in my sister-in-law's house today, so I have some coquito. So Merry Christmas
oh,
to everybody.
salud.
Mhm.
I
Yes.
just have
Do
green
you guys
tea.
make do you guys make coqui? I'm actually drinking water today. Do you guys make mojito with not mojito, coquito with eggs or just the different milks?
No, so it's the different milks and cinnamon and things like that.
Yum.
So, is there a particular country that makes it with the eggs? Because I thought eggs
So
always went in it.
here, eggnog.
Uh-huh.
Eggnog is what they make here. So that's a little bit different than the coquito. So
Mm-hmm.
this one has, it has
So,
the
coquito's never made with eggs.
white rum. No.
No, I don't think so.
Castillo, right? Is that what it's called?
Castillo.
The rum that's used to make coquito with?
Oh, no
Castillo?
tenemos mal.
Castillo?
You're on mute.
The Bacardi. We just use the white Bacardi or any light liquor because it has to be white, like the clear liquor. It can't be dark.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Otherwise,
Yeah,
it
a friend of
changes
mine,
up.
she made it. She's Puerto Rican, and I think it's called Castillo. She will be killing me because I'm killing the name of the alcohol. But
And it could be because everybody like we make
Casillos
it.
or Castillos or something like that. It was called, but it's clear rum.
Hmm.
Nikita, do you guys have a tradition for drinks during the holidays, especially now that you're in a new place? Have you seen traditions that they do that you had not been exposed to before?
Um, Not yet. I know they do like a lot of pork here locally, like especially within the luau's and everything. But I haven't yet seen anything that is like, oh, here's the traditional meal that locals would make in Hawaii. What I am seeing a lot is I think because a lot of the people here, from everywhere, especially within the military, that they start to ask like, oh, where can I find recipes to make? Someone in our neighborhood was wanting to make tamales, and she started to share it, and it's hard to come up with the certain ingredients here because we're on an island. um, but it's kind of nice to see how like everyone's starting to kind of find ingredients for those traditions and wanting to share it with others. I saw another lady, she had made, oh my god, I can't remember, it was a Puerto Rican dish, and she was sharing it. There's like, hey, you definitely want to try this. This is so good. And I love that she was like posting it on our community page and encouraging people to try something from her country. And like, she was just like, hey, it's delicious. I promise you won't regret it. And it was just really nice to start seeing some of those like things pop up and seeing like other people's traditions and the ingredients that they use, and how it kind of goes back to even our roots, is that we may use similar ingredients but come up with something different, and that's a part of one of our countries or another country. And it's just, I love that part of it. Part of me is more of like, hey, can y'all invite me to your house? Like, you trying all these foods. I don't know you, but I ought to invite myself. But I think that that's one of the nice things that I've been seeing. And I know my husband wants to make birria tacos this for the 24th, kind of switching it up. We like to make our own traditions, stick to our traditions, but make it our own. So I'm excited for that because my husband's like, he just can put salt on a piece of leather and it tastes like delicious. Like he has like this gift about cooking and no one taught him. So it's like a legit gift. So I'm excited. I would send you ladies some, but I don't know how it would last.
Has he made it before?
Yeah, he did. He did. And it sold, se vendió rápido. I don't think it sold quick translates as well as when we say it in Spanish, but in Spanish we have a saying, se vendió rápido, meaning that like something was so good that like it was eaten super fast. I don't know if we have a legit translation.
It went quick, maybe?
Quick?
It went quick?
It was just really good that everyone ate it. It just sounds like a mouthful to say it. Yeah.
I was gonna say too, a lot of the times, you know, we have like the same dish, but just kind of like with your own twist, you know, because like we keep talking about, you know, pasteles, and we talk about ayacas, and we talk, you know, and they all like it's different, but it's similar. It's like the same concept, but with a different twist, and we make it our own.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi,
Megan.
Bienvenido.
Hi, yeah. Lots of
¿Cómo estás?
Can you hear me?
Sí.
Nice to see everybody. Sorry I'm late. Yeah, you know, 2024 technical difficulties, but I'm here.
No, you're just on time. You're just in time. Just in time. ¿Cómo estás hoy?
Well, ahora?
Sí.
O
ahorita.
Well, un poco cansado.
Cansado.
There you go. Cansado. She says that my D's are like my R's. So I gotta put the extra emphasis on the D. Cansado. Y después de nuestro video, yo tengo que hacer trabajo de mi casa. I don't know how to say housework.
Sí, trabajo en la casa. Ajá.
Well, okay.
You know, Kevin stretches me and I stretch him in Spanish because he stretches me in other areas of my life. But Kevin, we were talking earlier about, I don't know if you're able to hear it, but I had a conversation with a teenager and I showed them a picture of an indigenous person from South America. So
Right.
if you could tell us a little bit, about your background, your history background, so we know that we have an expert here with us today.
Well, I am definitely far from an expert. Like I tell the students I work with, I'm not an expert and I don't expect them to be an expert, but I just want them to have some sort of familiarity with some of these backgrounds. And, you know, the problem often is that some of us are just not exposed to any of it. So when you spoke to that teenager and they were so shocked that some of those indigenous people look just like him or, you know, whoever they were talking about, it's because of that lack of exposure, right? And it's because a lot of what we're taught, particularly in the US and particularly in certain states, and particularly if you don't have a teacher like me, you're going to get a very mild, I hate to say it, but whitewashed version of history that's not going to make the connections between groups of people. And I think that's part of the issue that we often experience. And I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but that's the goal for a lot of people. They want us to not be able to make those connections with each other, because if we don't make those connections with each other, and if we don't understand enough about our own background and history, then we're going to be easier to control or easier to distract or easier to manipulate. So that's why I always emphasize history. History is super important to me. So I went to UCLA. I double majored in African-American, right? I double majored in African-American studies and sociology. So the sociology aspect of my studies tells me that everything is connected. Whether you think it is or it isn't, it totally is. And Viviana, she will be the first one to tell you that I'm always connecting this and that, and she'll be like, "Oh my gosh, like you're reading too into this," or something to that effect. But then after a while, she'll be like, "Yeah, I can kind of see it," because I really do like see how like these small things make a bigger picture. And I think with history, a lot of us, we think in broad strokes instead of the small steps that get us to the broad strokes. And it's the small steps, the broad strokes, and everything in between. So that's always been my perspective. And as it relates to that teenager, um, increasingly so, history is something that, often isn't emphasized or really encouraged as something that's practical. A lot of teenagers, they're taught, what you really need to know is basic math and how to read and write. That's it. We often hear nobody's going to ask you if you know the Pythagorean theorem. Nobody's going to ask you if you know anything about cell biology. And nobody's going to ask you if you know about, the dynamics of world history. Um, but to me, it's less important if whether or not somebody asks you those questions versus whether or not you can answer them unprompted, and whether or not you know your own history. Because if you know your history, it's easier for you to take agency in your present and in your future. Um, so when it comes to that teenager, they probably just had a very narrow, very broad a very broad understanding of what history is, and they probably weren't able to make those connections. And we see that all the time. And unfortunately, these teenagers are going to be adults who are going to be out in the world interacting with other adults and other children. And they're also going to have a hand in public policy decision making. So they're going to be making decisions from a very watered down idea of what history is, and they're not going to be able to make those connections as easily as they should. And that has real implications, because if I'm speaking to a 20-year-old Colombian person, like Viviana's son, he's 20 years old. If I'm speaking to a 20-year-old Colombian person and they don't see the connection between what they go through as a Colombian or a Latino American and what I go through as a Black American, if they don't draw those connections, they might not draw those connections when they interact with me, or when they go to vote, or when they go to a city council meeting or a school board meeting, or when they send their children to school, So I think all of those things are really important, and we have to be able to use education as a way to bridge those gaps and make those connections. Because if we don't, we're always going to be on these scattered plots when we really need to be coming together to be able to get to the big picture. And again, it's by design that we're not doing that, because divide and conquer is always how people try to go at, making their stake. And if we come together and we have this shared understanding, it's going to be a lot harder to accomplish that. And that's why they're going through the links that they are, to make sure that we're divided, not just in a public policy standpoint, but intellectually, culturally, spiritually. They don't want the blending. They don't want shared understanding. They want all of us to be in our own individual camps. And knowing a good amount of history, it disarms you in a way where you have to come together, because you have to be able to see your experiences in each other, not just in the present sense, but seeing your experience in the perspective of the past and what it could be in the future.
Yeah. I was gonna say thank you so much, Kevin, for saying all of that. I'm here like nodding my head. I feel like my neck is gonna like discombobulate because I'm like, yes, yes. Like I talk about this all of the time. Especially again, my family's from the Dominican Republic, and even when I look at my little family, like my immediate family, my husband and my children, there's so much diversity within the five of us. My husband looks completely different than me, and then we have three kids, same father, same mother, and you put my kids together and they don't even look related. My daughter is like white with fair, like very fair skin, light eyes. Her hair is different. And then I have my boys who are very dark skinned, like the softer hair and brown eyes. So they don't even look alike. And I talk about all of that because you go first. I mean, like when we moved here from New York, we originally came from New York. It was like, you guys are not related. Like my daughter always got those side eyes when she talked about her brothers, and because they don't look alike. And again, it's the exposure, the not knowing, the not being exposed to cultural diversity. In New York, there's people from everywhere you go. So you see a little bit of everything. So you're not surprised when you see things like that. And then you come here to a place like Virginia, and then it's like, where are you from? Where is, like, I can't even tell you how many times I get, where is Dominican Republic? Like literally last week, I was having that conversation with somebody. They're like, oh, you're from South America. No, I'm from the Caribbean. Oh, you're from South America. No, we're like in the side of, the continent, I just didn't know how to explain it. We're like, no, but it's again exposure. So thank you for what you do, for bringing that to people's attention. And like I always said, Viviana said it at the beginning of the show, I think education it's key. And if we don't make our voices be heard, people are not going to know that we exist. People are not going to be forced to ask questions. Like Viviana's student, if she wouldn't have been addressing the topic, that person would have never been exposed to that. So it is important for us to let our voices be heard and speak about us, and for our own benefit. Because every time that I'm researching or that I want to explain something and I read about it so that I can explain it better, I learn something new. So it's educating me so I can better educate the people that are around me. So thank you for that.
I love that. I had like everything has been like super resonating. I totally agree with you, Maddie, and the whole conversation. And for me, Kevin, you have so much experience with this and really bringing that history and awareness. What I've learned is that sometimes some of these things aren't intentional, like people might not be exposed to it. And I think it takes the right people to want to learn themselves, or be around areas like educators like yourself who are wanting to make sure that people have that broad representation where it's not just one community. You're trying to bring different communities and perspectives. And what I've noticed sometimes plays an influence is that, whether subconscious or conscious to a certain extent, that if it doesn't affect them directly, sometimes they don't pay attention to that. And it doesn't mean that it's done on purpose. I think it's very few cases where people don't care. And I think that that's sometimes the media and the internet exploits that, again, to kind of separate that and separate us. And then what ends up happening is that I've seen it where people are exhausted trying to talk about their community and defend their community. So they're constant on that fight or flight mode, or they feel defensive, and just one wrong person can throw them off. And then the media blows us up out of proportion, thinking that every situation is like that. So people who want to learn more, who want to immerse themselves to understand our communities better and even support us, sometimes feel apprehensive about asking. I've had people, I could tell when they're nervous about asking a question, and I don't want to sound, like I'm rude or anything. Like, no, please, like, I want this to be a safe space. Ask me your question. I appreciate that you wanting to ask a question. And so I make sure that I'm open to it and I try to answer it in the best possible way. And so with saying that, how can you encourage most of us who are doing the work to empower our communities, but also for people who are on the other side, who want to learn more, want to expose themselves and immerse themselves in learning history and trying to connect with us? How can you encourage that so we can really start to ourselves not widen that division, but kind of narrowing it down?
So that's a very, very good question. And that's something that I have myself wrestled with for plenty of years. When I graduated college, of course, I thought I knew the entire world like the back of my hand, right? And I was very idealistic. So I tried to approach that communication and I tried to inform people in a way that I think worked really well with some people, but for those apprehensive people who were maybe a little bit more timid or for whatever reason, and there are many reasons. Some of them, they felt either that it was overwhelming, like too much information all at once, or they felt as if not that they were being spoken with, but they were being spoken at or talked down to. And the Kevin from 7 to 10 years ago might not have cared as much about coming off that way. So you asked two questions. You asked, the first one was, what should the people who are trying to give that information out do? Like, how should they approach it? And then what do we do about the people who are probably more on the apprehensive side? So the people who are trying to get that information out, there are a few things that I would suggest to them. First of all, they have to give themselves grace and space. Grace to not be correct all the time. Grace to be exhausted, because this is an exhausting challenge that we have to try to prove your humanity to people. That could be very exhausting, especially if you are constantly thinking to yourself, this should be super simple. Why aren't you understanding this? Right? Another thing is that, like I started off saying, I'm not an expert. I'm far from it. And I could spend my entire life studying as much as I could, and I would still consider myself a student. I would still consider myself somebody who wants to learn, not somebody who's an expert. I feel like if I'm ever an expert in anything, I'm probably not thinking hard enough about the questions that I don't know the answers to. So I'm probably not curious enough if I consider myself to be an expert. So you have to give yourself that humility. And you also need to know when to switch things up. As an educator, I have to constantly switch up my approach to how I try to give information. And, sometimes you need to give yourself space if you're trying to do that, to be like, you know what? I need to take a step back to get myself back to where that energy is in a good place. You can't be worn down when you're trying to give this information to people, because they're going to know it. They're going to feel it. They're going to hear it in your voice. They're going to see it in your body language. Like, they're going to know that you're stressed out trying to talk about it. And it's stressful information that we're discussing, but if you're coming at it from that position, especially to a person who's already apprehensive about talking about it in the first place, that's not going to land the way that you want it to. So sometimes you need to know, as somebody who's trying to give that information, when to take a step back. So I used to be the type of person who was on social media all the time. Back when I had time to do anything. But I used to be on social media each comment that I would see that I'd be like, no, like, let me, and it would usually come from a good place. I'd be like, actually, no, this is what this means. Uh, Look into this. It will give you more information. And then that, unfortunately, because of, the realm that social media is, sometimes when you're trying to give information, it's taken as an attack. And heck, sometimes it was an attack. So there were often times where something that might have been from a genuine place then becomes this very exhausting, combative situation, and then you leave it like you just gotten into an argument rather than a very neutral, or not neutral, because these conversations shouldn't necessarily be neutral, but a polite discussion. You want to be a polite person when you're having these discussions, but sometimes they just sort of steer left. And that could very easily happen, especially in this politically charged moment that we're constantly finding ourselves in, whether it's today, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I mean, we're constantly going to be in that. So knowing when to pull back from that, and knowing when to be like, you know what, I'm not going to be on Facebook for a little while. If I see a post, if I'm on Facebook, I'm going to just let it go, because you can't save everybody. Just like you can't educate everybody, there are going to be students of mine that no matter what approach I give, the information just isn't going to land because they're not ready to receive it. I have to realize when that's the case, and then I just have to move on with my life. Because if I get stuck in that results-oriented mindset of, no, you need to know this, no, you need to understand this, I'm going to be perpetually disappointed. And figuring that out is a great way to give yourself some peace as somebody giving that information out. And as it relates to the people who are apprehensive about learning this information, if you're apprehensive about being in a pool, the best way to get in there and start swimming is go into the shallow end and work your way to the deep end. So stick your toes in, get somebody who you can trust, who knows a little bit about it. And also, a lot of this just requires courage. It requires you to be vulnerable. When you're learning stuff, whether you're a student in K through 12, college, whether you're discussing something with one of your friends or family members, I mean, nobody is going to be an expert at everything. So you're going to be vulnerable, and you're going to have to come at it from a position of, yeah, I didn't know that. And unfortunately, you're working in a terrain where people expect you to know something, and they're going to judge you if you don't. But you have to be okay with not knowing stuff and having people be sort of disappointed with you. Because the only way that you're going to grow is if you meet that head on and say, yeah, you're right, I didn't know that. But I'm not coming at it from a place of malice. I just didn't know because I didn't have that exposure, and I'm willing to learn. And most people, especially if they're people like me who are trying to get that information out, if you are sincerely trying to seek it out from a sincere and honest place, you're going to get people who are patient with you. But if you're somebody who tries to hide behind, oh, well, I'm too timid to learn stuff because I don't want to be chastised or, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to stay within this ignorance. That's where you get a lot of the animosity, because we can't afford your ignorance. You might be able to, but the rest of us can't. So yeah, you might get somebody who's a little bit upset with you or a little bit charged, but you're not dealing with the ramifications of that ignorance. You're not dealing with the policy decisions. You're not dealing with the social interaction. You're dealing with maybe being embarrassed, which I don't want people to be embarrassed. I want people to be informed. But ultimately, people just have to confront that and say, you know what? I'd much rather get the information that I want, even though I might be embarrassed because I'm vulnerable, versus staying away from all of that just to be safe. don't play it safe when it comes to learning about each other and about culture and about history, because history has never been safe. If you look at anybody in this video right now, our histories, whether it's been y'all as women or us as colored people or us as, just straight up non-white men, history has been a very dangerous terrain. So we can't afford to be safe when it comes to exposing each other to these things. However, I will say that people giving that information need to be aware that, you can't expect people to receive information from people they either don't trust or don't like. Because you have to feel comfortable when you're dealing with information that you don't know, because it is vulnerable. And we have to sort of strike that balance and giving that information out and being able to receive it. And also, people who give information out need to understand that they have their own vulnerabilities and that they can be apprehensive to other information as well. And like I said, a lot of us, we think that we're experts in the moment, but then when we go to research stuff, just like Maddie was saying, we start learning stuff and we're like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that, right? So we all have to like see each other in ourselves and see ourselves in each other in order for us to be able to exchange information a little bit better.
That was such a great answer. Thank you, Kevin. Really lots to inspire us to think how we move forward, how we can continually make an impact. And I love how you said there's that self-awareness part from both parties and how it can be positive or negative, and checking ourselves, like especially as we are giving out information. I love how you said that if we are in a space where we're exhausted and drained, to give ourselves that grace to not be trying to share information because we may come off, on the edge. Or that was just such a great feedback and insight for us. So I thank you so much.
Yeah, I definitely do appreciate that answer. And to piggyback a little bit on everything that you said, what, if any, suggestion you have for, again, I keep talking about how diverse we are, even within our own families and our own space. And one of the things that I can't speak for the ladies, but I'm gonna speak for myself and my family as well. The race conversation and diversity conversation is always very hard because Hispanic people view themselves as their nationality and not necessarily their race. I grew up in Dominican Republic and I lived in Dominican Republic the first 13 years of my life. So I never was questioned whether I was white or black. I knew I wasn't white because my mom was very fair skinned and I didn't look like my mom. And I looked more like my dad, who was a little darker and, has the curly hair, whatever. Today my hair is straight, but my hair is natural, very curly. So, but, I knew I wasn't white, but then I also looked at myself and I was like, I know I'm not completely black either, so it was kind of like that question. So race was never an issue until I actually came to the United States. And then when I got to the United States, it's like, oh yeah, you're Hispanic, but are you black? Are you white? I'm like, I'm both. I'm neither. And it was like that confusion. And I always struggle with my identity because of that. Because it's like, where do I fit in? Who am I? What am I? And it was like that understanding. And like we were talking, it's like the more you research, the more you try to get the words to be able to explain, you kind of understand yourself. But it's hard, again, to, I guess, make the elders or other members of the family kind of be able to have that conversation and be able to kind of explain and voice. I always tell the story. I started getting tattoos after the age of 40. But anyway, so one of my tattoos that I have, it's a crown that I have in the back, and it has a little sash and it says black. in Arabic. So I remember when I first got it, I showed my brother, very excited because my brother had tattoos. So I'm like, I know he's going to love it. And the first thing he asked is like, oh, it's cute, but what does it say on the sash? And I said, it says black. And his reaction to it was, since when are you black? And it was like, oh, I'm like, look at yourself in the mirror. You are black too, And it's like, how do you have, as a young adult, like maybe because you have, again, I'm raising children, and my children are very aware of the color of their skin and their background and things like that. So like my daughter is like very white looking, but you ask her and she'll tell you in a heartbeat, I'm Afro-Latina, So she's like, I'm black, she's white transparent, but I'm black, So how do you empower a young person to maybe have a conversation with an elder that might not necessarily understand the racial disparity?
So, long answer. So the first thing I'm going to say is, it sort of gets back to that thing of you can't necessarily have a conversation with any and everybody and walk away with it feeling fulfilled and feeling like, yes, I got my point across, and yes, everything won. That's not going to happen all the time. And with older generations of people, the older you get, unfortunately, a lot of us, we tend to get set in our ways, and that's just sort of it. I think if that's the goal, you should just try your best to use history to your advantage. So I tell my students all the time, do not confuse ethnicity, nationality, and race. Those are three different things. Now, sometimes those three things intersect, and they can all like come together to make a bigger picture, but they are all separate entities. So just a quick little refresher for anybody who's watching. Nationality is where you were born, the country of origin. Ethnicity does not require you to be born in any particular country or area. It requires some sort of shared experience, usually because of language or religion or some sort of cultural practices, anything from food to how you dress to different holidays that you practice and observe, all of that good stuff. And then race is a little tricky. So race borrows a little bit from ethnicity, but it also heavily relies upon your phenotype, aka your skin color, hair texture, bone structure, stuff like that. And some combination of all of that is going to paint a picture in any given time or space of somebody's race. So, for example, y'all might have heard of the one drop rule. So in the United States, there were rules that said if you had 1 drop of black blood or a percentage of black blood based on your lineage, you were considered black. You could look as white as Taylor Swift, but if you had just enough black blood, that was used to deem you as black. And of course, with that, back at that time, that was used to, control you and discriminate against you. And it was state by state. Each state had their own standards. So you could be in one state and be considered white and then move to a different state and be considered black. So there were people moving from one state to another just to get access to whiteness. So race, when people say race is made up, it's because of stuff like that. There's no set rules that really make race. So when you talk about Latin America and you talk about how race and ethnicity and nationality are sort of way different than what they are in the United States, well, yeah, that's really true. So, a lot of people don't know that over 90% of the enslaved Africans that came from the transatlantic slave trade, they didn't go to Northern America. They went to Central and South America. So the racial dynamics are completely different than what they are here, as opposed to, say, the DR or Puerto Rico or Colombia or Brazil. So, their concepts of race are different. They still have it, but not necessarily in the rigid way that we have it out here. Just like you said, Maddie, when you came here, it was like, yeah, I get it. You're from the DR. That's cute. But are you black or are you white? Right. So that's really what they want to know. What's your proximity to blackness, which is this extreme, and what's your proximity to whiteness, which is the other extreme? And based on what you tell me, that's how I'm going to treat you. So that's really what they wanted to know. How do I interact with you? Because if you would have said, oh, well, I'm black. Okay, well, I know I can't say this around her. I know I have to do this. I know I have to do that. Oh, but if you're white, okay, well, now we can talk about the black people with each other. I can bring you home to me to meet my parents, and we can interact with each other in a white space. So there are reasons why race is so rigid in the United States. Having those conversations with older people, they're coming from that very rigid sense of what race is. So they're like, oh, well, no, don't claim to be black. You know what that means? Like, no, because they're coming at it from a perspective of when we were black, we were forced to be black. They told us we were black. That wasn't something that we chose to acknowledge and self-identify as. No, we were ascribed that black identity, and it was used to condemn us. It was used to discriminate against us. That's not something that you should want. And it's sort of like that knee-jerk reaction, how like they're sort of overcorrecting because they don't want to get back to that space. And we, getting back to that humility as younger people, and I mean, the four of us are in comparison to like our older generations, we have to understand that we didn't experience that in the ways that they did. So they have reasons to feel that way. And they have reasons to feel that way for the rest of their lives, unfortunately. And sometimes they're not going to come fully on board to where we're at. And it's unfortunate, but it's just one of the many consequences of racism and xenophobia in the intersection of the two, because it does lifelong generational harm to people. And unfortunately, we have a tendency to pass it down to the next newer generations. And we have issues relating to each other because the newer generation is exposed to a different set of circumstances. Now, as it relates to younger people and their understanding, their attitudes of, basically self-love and understanding that, being black, being white, all of that, there's nothing wrong with it. Love who you are and, be proud of it. And I think we're seeing major strides in that now. And I think, again, it gets back to knowing history. If you know where certain things come from, just like the one drop rule, if you never heard of it, you will probably never understand just how ugly that history was. So you wouldn't be able to relate to your grandparent who's saying, no, it's not okay to be black. You're going to claim that you're this or you're that. But if you know where the history comes from, it makes it okay for you to accept that it happened. You don't have to be glad that it happened, but accept that it happened and move forward in a good space and be happy and proud that you are here in this moment and you came from people who survived and endured all that. So I tell people all the time, because, I get into debates with my friends where they're like, oh, well, Black people, they get Black History Month. Hispanic people have Hispanic Heritage Month. Why can't we get White Heritage Month or White History Month? And I'm like, well, it's because white people...
Not the rest of the year.
Right, exactly, first of all. But also it's because white people they've never had a shared experience that they had to endure some sort of trauma and come out on the other end of it. Not as a collective group, maybe as Irish, maybe as French, but again, that's getting back to nationality. That's not race. So as a race, it's really never been white people. It's only been people of color. And, there's something that we, should be proud about coming out on the other side of that. So I think exposing our younger generations to our history from, the start, which isn't slavery, by the way, right? So even when I do world history with my students, and Viviana will tell you, I start all the way from the beginning. I tell them all about Mansa Musa, the richest person to ever live in West Africa and Mali. I talk about Egypt. I talk about we did North and South America a few weeks ago. So we were talking about indigenous cultures. Our history doesn't start when white people acknowledged us, right? Or when white people started using us for free labor. Our history started long before that, and it will continue long after racism. So I want us to be able to start from the origins and everything in between, because that's how you're going to get the best sense of pride in young people and that best sense of connection to their history. And if you don't have a connection to your history, you won't have a real connection to your present or your future.
That was
Thank you so
perfect.
much for everything that you said, Kevin. Yes, because it intertwines with our objectives here with Que Pasa Mujer and just educating. And I didn't talk a lot today because I get Kevin's knowledge all the time, and I really wanted you guys to engage with him. But it's I love the perspective that you gave us because it's true, right? Like you're asking me, what am I, so that you know how to handle me, right? So that's we have to think about that all the time and how we respond to people. And like you said, we have to know who we are, and in order to know who we are, we have to educate ourselves, and then we can know how to respond and just kind of take pride. And I think it's our job as adults, as parents, as leaders, to feed that to young people. So I think it's very extremely important. And I just want to thank you again, Kevin, because he's always making deposits, knowledge to our youth. Some people reject it, some people accept it, but it's our responsibility to just kind of do the job. And if you feel rejection, then you stop, or you know what I'm saying, whatever you desire to do. But I think it's definitely our job that if I have information and I want to share it, instead of being a hoarder, I'm going to share that information with you. So I do thank you for that. So our hour is almost up. So we're going to go ahead and get ready for Maddie's poem. So we're going to see if we're going to get a chill one or not a chill one.
No promises, no chill one, but it's funny because again, I always try to prepare but not too much. But first, before I get into the poem, I just want to say thank you to Kevin, because I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, because this is just kind of like right up my alley. Is kind of what I try to talk about, what I struggle with internally with my family, outside. Like I said, every time that I get the question, so what are you? Like, where are you, or where are you from? And it's like, I was born in the United States, but and it's like I had to kind of get into it. But like we were talking before, I do appreciate the question being asked rather than the assumption being made. So I respect you more if you ask me the question and I have to go through the whole explanation than if you just assume. So are you Mexican? No, I'm not Mexican. So nothing against Mexican. I love you guys. But anyway, this poem I wrote in 2015, and oddly enough, it came. I went to a poetry competition, and a friend of mine asked a question. He did a poem on stage, and one of the other poets was upset about it. So the poet that did the poem, he was Puerto Rican and he was very light skinned. And then the poet that got upset, she was a Black poet. My white poet was talking about the Black struggle that he saw in his family, because again, his family is composed of Black and white people. And he was talking about the Black struggle, and she was upset that he was appropriating race. So that's where this poem came from. It's a Black thing, and you will never understand. A phrase we hang on to when we want to divide. It is easier to give up, to be upset, and assume the person on the other end of the conversation just doesn't understand. Or is it you that refuses to be understood? Let's pause and elaborate. We are set that the mind can only relate by being placed in a certain space, when in reality, all you have to do is dig deep to the root of what is felt. Situations are ingrained in our brains not by what happens, but by what emotions that immortalize that particular event, by the feelings that they awaken. As we get older, just like language, our knowledge of emotion expands, and we learn to categorize feelings in our cortex. We put them in shelves and relate them to a particular event, but that's the big mistake we make. One cannot assume your feelings of rejection is worse than the one I felt. Because yours is Black and mine is beige, my pain is less because it's lighter. Does that make sense? Pain is pain, and it hurts regardless of your shade. We focus so much in what makes us different rather than what makes us the same. What would be the basis of racism if our skin colors were all the same? We are blessed and cursed by our sight. We have given it the power to decide what goes where by how similar we are. Don't be naive. If you take a seed and plant it, with time, you will have a tree. The trunk will grow, branch out, and be a collection of different limbs, each one distinct, but still part of the same tree. Exposure and experience will be key. I can expect you to relate to my story if you don't hear me speak. Will you ever fully understand what it means to be me? Maybe not. But it shouldn't be a white, Black, Hispanic thing. It should be a you, a me, an us thing. Our past is a point on the map to show where we used to be and not where we are at. If equality could remain raw, pure, untouched, like a natural resource, it will be the sea birthing the tree of life, and all of us will be the branches, different but unified. Hang on to that before you disregard me for not being Black. You might be surprised how much of you is me, how much of each other we understand.
Gracias, Madi.
I had
Thank
not read
you.
that out loud
you.
since 2015, so I'm
Maddie, I
sorry.
love it. Always, in tune with our
Yeah, it was perfect. So
always
perfect
in
that I
tune with our
froze in the
topic.
happy.
I love it.
I'm trying to replicate the frozen.
Yeah, the frozen happy face. Yeah, I can't take it off, but we're gonna run with it.
Right.
Thank you
Well-
all. This was amazing.
Yeah. I hope that you guys can see me fine, but I thank you again for your time, for all the knowledge that was given today. Thank you, Maddie, for your poem. And I hope that you guys have an amazing week, and we will be here next Sunday at 4:00 Eastern 2024, and look forward to 2025. So thank you, Mark, to our producer as well.
Salud. Thank you. I'm still frozen, but I'm here.
Whether you're a seasoned designer, dabbler, or just starting out, this course is for you.
are just so impressed with them. Like I said, we've been with them for years. I will recommend and refer anyone to them. We stand by A+ academics. They're the best.
A+ tutorial really did help me with all my grades. They all went up when I came to this place. And I would say I recommend this school to everyone.
So it's a really good environment to be in, especially for me because it makes me look up to my parents.
If you have students that need academic help, A+ Academics is the place to be. A+ Academics, what a great place to go for academics.
It's just a really great place to learn.